Yeah, I have the pleasure of introducing Congressman Virginia Foxx, who represents North Carolina's 5th District in the U.S. House of Representatives. She has helped lead national movements to reduce federal government spending and increase government oversight and accountability. Due to her leadership, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which provided a long overdue reform of the Workforce Investment Act, was signed into law. This bipartisan, bicameral compromise, well, there's a phrase you don't hear very often, bipartisan, bicameral compromise. I thought that was done out of style.
No.
Okay, that's good. Streamlines and improves existing federal workforce development programs and fosters a modern workforce that American businesses can rely on. Dr. Foxx is a graduate of the University of North Carolina. She earned her education doctoral in curriculum and teaching higher education. And I look forward to her comments because I know she's got some good news for us. So, Dr. Foxx.
You want to close that or just, there you go. Great. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I'm delighted to be with all of you, although I'm still a little puzzled as to why you'd want such a novice as me in this area to come and talk. I feel a little like I'm taking coal to Newcastle, and most of you are probably too young to know what that analogy is, but I also know my coal bucket's pretty empty. So that's a good way to start. I also tell everybody my middle initial is A. It used to stand for Ann, but now it stands for accountability. So I love the work that you all do because you will help us hopefully be able to achieve better accountability long term in the federal government. So I thank you for the work you do on behalf of your respective fields, the agencies and organizations, to ensure that our government becomes more open and efficient. But I will tell you one more little personal thing. When I did do my doctorate, I had to take a statistics course. I was never good at math in high school or college, but I approached statistics like a language. I knew I was pretty good in languages, and I actually fell in love with it. And had I been exposed to it earlier in my life, I truly might have gone a very different way with my life. I became an English major in undergraduate school, but what you do is fascinating to me, and working with data is fascinating. The role you're playing in advocating for better data standards is commendable, and it's really critical for the benefit of our society. The work you put into achieving greater transparency in our government is tough, but it's very worthy. At times, I'm sure it can be very frustrating and seem as though the work is hard and the results are slow to arrive. But I'm here to tell you your work is necessary, it is timely, and ultimately it will change lives for the better. Just today, the other committee I serve on, Oversight and Government Reform Committee, held a hearing on evidence-based policy making. In the committee, we heard from a number of witnesses on how to best use statistical information to guide decisions on policy. Do any of you know about the Commission on Evidence-Based Policymaking? This has got to be one of the best things that's been done in the federal government in 50 years. So I'm thrilled about it, and I was there When I read the speaker had appointed this committee, I was excited, and then I was excited at the hearing today. Unfortunately, we didn't have as many members there as I had hoped would be there. But I think it's an issue as time has come. I really do. I've been way ahead of my time for a long time, and I've been working on this for a long time. From my earliest work experiences at UNC Chapel Hill, where I worked with programs that were grant funded almost completely, then Appalachian State, where I went to work on grant funded program, then Malin Community College, and then working with nonprofit organizations and as a proposal reader. I know firsthand the difficulties that federal grant applicants face when it comes to grant reporting. Unfortunately, it appears that not a lot has changed in terms of data reporting in the last few decades, and that came out this morning at the OGR hearing. One of the pieces of information from the hearing was that only 37% of program managers responsible for managing the 1,500 different programs administered by the federal government said their program had been evaluated in the last 5 years. And as we learned from many, many hearings in the Education Workforce Committee, now more than ever before, it seems we have an overabundance of data, but we have very little in the way of actual information. Educational institutions at all levels, as well as thousands of nonprofit organizations throughout the country, rely heavily on grants. The research produced by universities can and often does save lives, create new industries, and lead to an improved quality of life for Americans and the wider world. I think probably all of you know this, but I will repeat it for those who might not. Currently, our federal government awards more than $600 billion in grants annually to state and local governments, agencies, nonprofits, universities, and other organizations. $600 billion is a significant amount of money. Roughly translated, this means that the United States government awards $600 million, or the gross domestic product of Switzerland, to grantees every year. While transparency might not be the goal of all Swiss banks, it should be the goal of the United States government. If the government is going to dole out $600 billion, then we must utilize the incredible technology we have at our disposal to streamline the federal grant reporting process and learn something from all that hardworking taxpayer money. However, one of the witnesses this morning stated that, quote, most of the nation's social programs produce modest or no impacts on the problems they were meant to address. And even if they do, we can't measure it. Now, most universities have entire teams of staff whose sole purpose is competing for some of the $600 billion in federal grants that the government issues annually. With that much money up for grabs, universities need a team to be able to be competitive in securing grants. I know that when I was a college administrator, I didn't have the money to dedicate to those salaries. This may surprise you, but 30 years ago, many of us were filling out these applications by hand or by typewriter, and we relied on the post office and fax machines to submit our request. When mistakes were made, you became very close acquaintance with the cutting-edge technology of our time, whiteout. So, well, Anna, I've lost some. Is that it? Here we go. Technology. See, if I'd had this on an iPad, I wouldn't be in that show. Unfortunately, without updating the way we process grant reports, in many ways, we might as well be still operating with a typewriter and a fax machine and whiteout. 30 years ago, I doubt many members of Congress would have had a vested interest in moving from antiquated static data towards a standard open data format. However, that is changing. Now most of us have one or more staffers whose primary assignment is to assist grantees with their applications for grants. Unfortunately, the limited number of staffers assigned to this important work cannot rival the private sector's ability to hire teams of specialists. That means that often the small businesses, or quote, little guy, who cannot afford to hire a team of specialists or afford the burdensome hours of filling out duplicative paperwork, are not able to compete. One of the most meaningful ways that we can increase efficiencies is to fix the way federal grants are reported to Congress, government, and the agencies. I know you've been talking about the Data Act. In fact, you've talked about it a lot today. Congressman Iss's bill has made a positive impact in securing transparency and efficiency in our government. Though the Data Act was passed in 2014, some of the benefits of its passage have just recently been realized. As you know, the Data Act required every federal agency to start reporting open spending data and to pilot how the use of standardized data formats could ameliorate the reporting process of federal grants and their subsequent recipients. This formulated a single and consistent data set that showcases the entire government spending, which led to increased transparency for agencies, Congress, and taxpayers. Additionally, the Data Act made great strides in increasing government transparency. Now we must tackle the next reservoir of federal dollars, which is grant spending. A firm foundation was laid by the Data Act's mandated pilot in terms of monitoring the benefits of data standardization. I commend HHS's work in building the CDER library and OMB for ensuring that this was accomplished and for realizing the potential that this standardization can have moving forward. And I do think that Mick Mulvaney is a person who will really appreciate the groundwork that was laid here. Mick is a strong conservative who believes in results, and so I think we'll see him build on it. The CDER library utilized by HHS is one example of how aggregated data reporting can be used by agencies to streamline the process of grant reporting. This pilot program proved how we could gain more efficiencies and transparency in the process of open data reporting. Now I want to tell you about what I hope will be, what I know is going to be a new development in this area. We are going to use the Data Act Foundation to put another building block in this area. I am going to soon introduce the Grant Reporting Efficiency and Assistance Transparency Act. It has a fabulous anagram. The Great Act. You know, staff sit around for months trying to come up with good anagrams and twisting language into all kinds of ways to try to get that. I don't know how Carson figured this one out so easily. He said it was out there, so he picked it up and used it. So it's not the greatest, but it's the great. So you'll be able to remember it. This bill will ensure the modernization of reporting by grant recipients by mandating a standardized data structure for the information that recipients must report to federal agencies. It assigns to the executive branch the task of establishing these data standards. The bill also creates goals for these new standards, including searchability, consistency with accounting principles, and a non-proprietary product. The bill will ensure the executive branch consults with the grant recipient community and software providers to accomplish this. We named it the Great Act for a reason. The results of the passage will be great for stakeholders, government agencies, job creators, grantees, and grantors. When this bill passes, the draft of this said if this bill passes. So you see how I think. When this bill passes, the hours spent by grant recipients to comply with grant reporting will be severely cut. Instead of administrators spending extensive hours entering duplicative information into multiple fields, grant recipients will be able to focus on actually running their programs. And that's very important. Too many people in the federal government, and all over for that matter, spend more time complying with the conditions of the grant than actually putting in the paperwork to show they're complying than actually complying. One of the biggest flaws in federal government reporting is the lack of a central bank for grantees to report to grantor agencies. Understandably, if the reporting requirements for federal grants are not easily searchable, this has and will continue to yield waste and inefficiency and can even empower fraud and abuse. Another huge problem that federal grant reporting faces is the way grant reports are compiled. Many grants are submitted as electronic documents, such as in Word or as PDFs. While this is an improvement to the typewriter, the tool is incomplete because the reports are static. Grantees are forced to enter the same information multiple times, and none of the information is aggregated. In order to fix the way federal grants are reported, we must move from document street to a data superhighway. There's another reason for introducing the GREAT Act. We know that modernizing grant reporting works and has tangible effects. We've learned that Australia has been a leader in this area and has saved a minimum of $1 billion. Given the different scale of spending, we should be able to save many more billions of dollars here in the United States. You know, Everett Dirksen said $1 million here, $1 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. Well, now we're talking about $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and we're talking about real money. Australia's success in savings is something we must duplicate and expand on in America. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak with you today. Any effort to bring our grant reporting into modernity is time well spent. Though it's taken longer than any of us would like, I remain confident that together we can achieve remarkable accomplishments. I know I'm the only thing standing between you and happy time. So, with that, again, thank you, and God bless the work that you do.
Have time for a question or two?
Yes, and if I can't answer it, I have Carson and Cyrus and
Okay.
Anna with me.
Okay.
I doubt that y'all are going to ask me questions I probably can't answer, but we'll try it. Anyway, I told you, I'm the only thing standing between
Well,
them and
but
happy hour.
see, yeah, I understand, but these are data nerds. I mean,
I know.
they don't know what happy hour is. Mark.
I'll speak up. Thanks for posing the great app. I'm looking forward to reading the text.
Well, it's not out yet, so, you know, we're massaging it.
I'm just wondering whether there are any plans to include this single audit package in the list of items that would have to be structured data.
Where's Carson? There you are. Can we do that in this bill? I don't know if it would be germane.
I'm not sure, but I know the auditing aspects are very pertinent to what's going on here. I know that there's a lot of interest in that, and so it's something it's on our radar.
One of the things, you will hear the term germaneness a lot, and We have sometimes, I mean, I know people introduce 2,000-page bills. That's not our style in our office. It's more like 7 or 8, 9-page bills, sometimes 2 pages. But on first blush, I'm not sure that we would get that by the parliamentarian, but I don't know that. But again, it's something that is an issue that's out there.
Yes, sir.
Can I borrow that? Thank you for putting more focus on this. There's currently, I think, a lot of public focus. I should say Alex Howard from the Sunlight Foundation. We care a lot about grants because we know that a lot of government money goes out that way and it's not always well tracked. One of the models for the Data Act was what would happen with the stimulus money, American Reinvestment Act. And grants there were reported by grantees. Does your legislation in this case look to grantees to file their own grants themselves and then have some way to validate that? What's the process going to be like?
We're not looking to change the grantee reporting process itself. The standardization will come from OMB, and then we hope to, have everything come downstream from that. So any current process is not, we may take a look at that issue. I know one issue that surrounds this entire space is that each grant has its own, most grants have their own statutory source. And so the way in which they report could be different from each grant to each grant and what information is mandated. And so there may be a point at which people look to conform those things and try to help with this effort. But the touch is to try to have the OMB have a standard that it does not try to change the essence of actual reporting processes.
Do you have a plan for identifying the names of the grantees in terms of an entity? If you went recall recovery.gov, we used the DUNS number for that, and then that data became dramatically less useful. Are you all thinking about an identifier for entities so people can track grantee names?
Let me respond partly to that. At that hearing today, there were 2 big issues. One was privacy. And there's a great deal of concern, and there was on the part of the commission members who came today, on how do we walk this fine line between getting out information that should be out there to the public and protecting the privacy of American citizens. And they gave a couple of examples of fairly small projects where, had the information been put out unaggregated, it would have been easy to have identified who the people were. And so I think that will be an issue, not necessarily we'll have to deal with, but that you're going to see a lot more attention given to in the federal government. I am a big privacy advocate, but I'm also a big advocate of getting results in the federal government and getting grantees to be able to measure what it is they're doing. But I hadn't thought about it so much till today, frankly, on the privacy issue, when a couple of the commission members brought up some real life examples of that. And so it's an issue. I mean, Carson's welcome to respond to that, but the first thing that comes to my mind with your question is how do we continue to, or how do we walk a fine line in that area? And I think there will be a lot of people who will spend as much time on the privacy issue as they will on making sure that the information gets out there. One of the big issues that also came up today, which I have always felt keenly about, and again, I'm not an evaluator, but I've played one on TV, if you will. I mean, I've had to do it all my life. And so I realize that if you don't have clear and measurable goals to start with, you can't know what you're measuring. And I think that's going to be another whole issue that the Congress is going to have to spend a lot of time on. And I suspect that will come first in terms of if you can get the committees to put some attention on that so that we can begin to know what it is we want to measure and what it is we want to evaluate and what information we can get out there. So, and they tried to make the point today in the hearing that there's some complexities here that people haven't thought about.
And I could just add to that, whether it's privacy concerns or things like proprietary products and maintaining property rights and also trying to create something that's non-proprietary, I think, we're gonna have goals and maybe some guardrails in legislation, but ultimately, I think it's best to leave some of these really fine-tuned trade-offs to OMB ultimately, and how they would develop a standard. So I think, we're gonna set some goals and guardrails, but some of this balancing act has to be done through the executive branch as well.
Okay, again, Dr. Foxx, thank you for spending time with us, and especially thank you for the great act.